I am honored to introduce Jeff Zentner and Francesca Padilla, author. Jeff is the author of In the Wildlife, and Francesca is the author of What's Coming to Me. What's Coming to Me is a great teenage heist. Min is in a difficult situation with her mother, is very ill. She works at the popular Duke's ice cream shop near the end of the island. Her boss is an incredible jerk who comes and goes from the shop. Min has reason to believe that the shop is a front for illegal activity. Unfortunately, she has to become the adult in her family, which is very difficult. Her next-door neighbor, Cece, helps her emotionally, and her cousin moves in with her to help pay the rent. They also become involved in the mystery of the store, along with another summer worker, Eli. If you enjoy mysteries with a revenge plot, this is the book for you. Jeff's book is called In the Wild Light. It is an award-winning YA book. It is so beautifully written and often is referred to as a Valentine for Tennessee. Cash, like Min, is also thrust into an adult role as a teen. His mother dies from an opioid addiction, and Cash's grandfather is very sick with a respiratory illness. His best friend Delaney discovers a cure for cancer while experimenting with moss grown near the river where they go canoeing. She is given a full scholarship to a Connecticut prep school. She will only go if her best friend Cash is given an equal scholarship. Cash's grandfather wants him to go. Both Cash and Delaney are faced with difficult situations attending the prep school, but they take the high road. I found myself cheering for these two as they adjust to their new school.
Oh, sure.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. So now I guess we're going to kind of take it away here. And y'all, we're going to have some time for questions. So be thinking of your questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. And Francesca, I just want to ask you, would you talk a little bit about your journey as a writer, how it is that you come to be sitting here with an amazing published novel in your hand?
Thank you. Oh my gosh. So I have been writing since I was very little, like third grade. So I tell people like my third grade teacher was like, "Hey, you're really good at writing." Like looking at my assignments, she's like, "You should keep doing it." And I was like, "Okay." And I just like kept doing it. And I was really into like chapter books and like teen stories even before I was a preteen, I think. And so I just never stopped writing about teenagers, even when I was in college and doing workshops after. I went to State University of New York at Purchase College, which is like a big arts school. It's like the arts SUNY, which we call State University of New York. And so I studied creative writing there and learned a lot of like the formative, like professional writing things that you need to know, like how to do a workshop and all that. And then I just stopped writing. And then after I graduated, I just stopped writing. I think I'd like had too much. And then I got pregnant in my mid-20s, and I was terrified that I would never write a book. So that I started writing like the very, very, very beginning of this, like a different version of this story. And then So what about you?
Well, that's awesome. The thing that is really cool about these things is getting to hear all the different ways that authors become authors, because there are truly as many different paths to becoming an author as there are authors. So I did not ever in a million years imagine growing up that I would be a writer someday. So I grew up in this small town. This was pre-internet. I'm very old, so this was pre-internet. So you couldn't like go on Instagram and see authors being goofy and, you know, wearing pajama pants and playing with their dogs or whatever. Like I just had to envision what authors were like. And so I put books on a pedestal, of course. I love books. I love reading. And so I imagine the people who wrote books just kind of dwelling in like ivory towers and, you know, at these big mahogany desks, and they'd finish a manuscript and put it in a basket, and like a team of silver doves would bring it down to earth. So I never thought that I would write. So I did music instead. That seemed attainable to me. I became a guitar player, and in my early 20s, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee to be a musician. So I did that like all through my 20s, and then I hit age 30 and kind of had this realization, oh, if you don't make it big in music by age 30, like you probably won't. Like people don't tend to be, hey, there's this hot new 38-year-old who's blowing up the pop charts. Who now?
That's my age right now, 30.
Well, and that's So forget your musical dreams. They're done. But you're doing great with music. You're early to music. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to make it at music. So I start volunteering at a music camp for teenagers called Tennessee Teen Rock Camp, teaching how to play guitar. And I just really fell in love with young adults and the way that they love the art that they love. And I thought it would be really cool to make art for young adults. But of course, I can't make music for young adults. Like, at this point, I'm like 36. I could be Billie Eilish's dad. Like, I'm not going to be making music for young adults. So I was like, well, what can I do? Oh, I guess I could try to write young adult books. Like, you don't have to be under 30 to write young adult books. At this tent just before us was Angeline Boley, who wrote Firekeeper's Daughter. I think she was 55 when that book was published, and it was her debut novel. So it's just not the same deal with music and writing. So I was like, hey, I could write young adult books. So that's kind of how I ended up writing young adult books. So you alluded a little bit to the origin of this book, but I want you to talk about how this book came into being. Like, what were the threads you pulled together? How did this kind of grow up into a book? And talk about the process of getting it published too. Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah, so it took a really long time to come together in the way that it is now. Firstly, I knew that I wanted, like, when I was pretty young, like 19 or so, like still in college, I felt so isolated and alienated because I had a mother who was very sick. She was sick since I was she had always been sick like her whole life, but then when she had kids, she had me and my brother, she was, and I talk about this in the author's note a little bit, she stopped being sick, kind of like she had like a serious heart condition that she was born with, and then it kind of went away after she had kids, or like kind of wasn't as big of a deal. And then she had chronic kidney disease, like a very serious kidney disease when I was a teenager. Like she had to do dialysis at home. So if you're familiar with that, it's like a lot. It's like a lot. It's not just, yeah. So I just felt like so alienated by like not being able to talk about it with anyone. I didn't know anybody else who had to deal with that. And I was always worried about like, when am I going to lose my mom? And so I had read books about like parents who had passed away, or, things like that, or, orphans, like, Charles Dickens. I was like really into Charles Dickens when I was in high school.
As a kid.
Yes. I like the characters, like how he drew the characters. I feel like I do that too. I knew early on I wanted to write about that. Like, I wanted to see that out there, but I didn't really turn it into a story. And then I had the idea for the character, and she just kind of lived in the back of my mind. I've said this before, that the character is based off of this dude I was dating in high school, his little sister. Like, I saw a picture of her, and I was like, oh my gosh, she looks so cool. And she just like looked so badass, and so I just kind of kept that character like tucked in the back of my mind. And then I had this idea when I was in my mid-20s, and I was like, oh, I gotta write a book because it's never gonna happen if I don't do it. And so there's the whole there's a different version of this book where she's just like kind of dealing with her mother's illness and looking for her father, and it's more of a coming of age, and there's no thriller, there's no crime, there's none of that. And then I put it away because I don't know. I worked on other things. I did a lot of workshops, and that's how I met my agent. And which I always tell people, if you get out there, do the workshops, do the networking, but make it about how you can contribute as well, not just what you can get out of it. But I just kind of fell into getting an agent, and so I wrote a book. We went on submission to publishers. That didn't sell. My mother passed away, and then I was useless for 5 years. And then I finally had the idea for the book that as it stands now, it just kind of fell together and it became a whole new product, a whole new thing that I wrote pretty quickly, and it took about a year to sell. Which is kind of a long, I don't know, I think it's a normal amount of time, but it feels like it's a long time, especially when everybody's like, you know, you hear about all these big deals and like splashy, like, you know, 6-figure deals in 2 weeks. Like, you know, so that's how my book came about. What about you?
That is a great story, and that's why I love to ask that question at these events, because again, just like authors, like every book has such an incredibly unique journey that brings it to us, and just seeing how the sausage is made like just makes books all the more magical to me. Seeing how they draw in the threads of people's experience and like how they reflect what's going on in their life at the time, I just think it's so cool. So In the Wild Light. Yeah. This was my fourth book, and my project. Well, first of all, the title. I was just out kayaking one night around dusk, and the sun was setting over the river, and the light was so beautiful. I was like, just in awe of it, and this phrase just popped into my head: "In the wild light," and I said, okay. That's a transmission from whatever other realm that my songwriting process when I was a songwriter used to really rely on those like random transmissions, just little phrases. I was like, all right, that's something. I got to put that away. Meanwhile, I was starting to think about a book I wanted to write. So far, all of my books have been in some form or fashion me kind of struggling with a question that I want to answer and doing it through a story form that I love. So my first book was really like answering the question of who are we? Do we how much agency do we have in the course of our lives? And then I wanted to combine that with my love for the TV show Friday Night Lights.
Oh my God, I love that show.
Isn't that a great show?
That's the only reason I know anything about football.
And this is what I tell people. I recommend it to people. People
It's
are
so
like,
good. It's a young adult show.
absolutely, absolutely. People are like, but I don't like football. I'm like, that's okay. It is not about football. And they're like, isn't that the thing it's about? I'm like, yes and no. Just watch it. How many of y'all have seen Friday Night Lights? Okay. Y'all
Great
gotta watch
show.
Friday Night Lights.
It's a great
unbelievable show. Truly unbelievable. Like one of the great YA texts of the 2000s, in my opinion. So for this book, the texts that I wanted to explore were two of my favorite movies growing up: Dead Poet Society and Good Will Hunting. So how am I, and I love boarding school books just in general, because boarding school was so far from my educational experience. I went to the most public of public schools. Like, ain't nobody getting turned away from this school I went to. So I thought it would be so cool to have the money to go to private school, and like other kids like reading, and you know, you hang out with your teachers. I was such a nerd. I thought that would be cool. So I wanted to experience that through a book and write a boarding school book. And I also wanted to write a story about a genius and their best friend, but I wanted to write it from the best friend's perspective, because in the movie Good Will Hunting, I always wonder about the experience of Ben Affleck's character, who lives in the shadow of this genius. So that's what this came from. It's a story about a young girl in rural Appalachian Tennessee who discovers a mold that has powerful antibiotic properties, and it kills antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So she gets a scholarship. She gets to this private school, which she will only accept if they give one to her best friend as well. And the story's told from the best friend's perspective, as he has to decide whether he's going to leave his grandfather, who has emphysema, who's dying of emphysema, and go to this private school to enjoy opportunities that his life in his small Appalachian town would never otherwise afford him. And then from there, it was just about stuffing everything else I love at the time into the book. So I loved kayaking. So I was like, how can I get that in the book? Oh, what do they do at those fancy schools? They row. They're out there rowing on those boats. So I put rowing in there instead. And also before, when Cash is back living in Tennessee, he loves canoeing. So I got the river in there. But I also loved poetry at the time. So I'm like, how am I going to get poetry in there? Oh, he's going to a fancy private school. they're going to be teaching poetry there. There's going to be a poetry teacher there. So he gets into a poetry class. So it all just kind of pulling all those threads together, putting it all in the bucket, and there we go.
Yeah.
So I want to hear some of this book that you just told me about. Will you read some from it?
Sure, I will. And I want to say I was also inspired by movies. I like to tell people every so often I like drop the little nugget that my book is highly influenced by the movie Scarface. Oh, nice. Like that's where the title comes from. There's a part where they're sitting in the car, and they're talking about, and he's like, and he hasn't risen the ranks of like drug dealer yet, and he's like, me, I want what's coming to me. And his friend says, oh, well, what's coming to you? And he's like, the world, Chico, and everything in it.
That's a great. Okay, real quick though, on Twitter a little while ago, there was a fevered debate: young Pacino or young De Niro. Where do you fall on that? I just watched Serpico for the first time, and I think I gotta go young Pacino. He was a very beautiful man. I was surprised by how kind of neurotic he seemed back then.
Yeah.
This real kind of neurotic energy to him, but a very beautiful man. Where do you fall? Young Pacino, young
man.
De Niro?
I think I gotta go with De Niro.
Wow.
I think I gotta go with De Niro. Well, okay, my family is really into Scarface, so I sort of inherited the interest in Scarface.
The Scarface recessive gene. Yes, yep.
Even though he is not Latino at all. And his Spanish is so bad. Worse than mine, which is not great. But yeah, and I noticed that the Pacino, he was wearing like a hoodie or something. And I was like, all right, you do look cute, but it's still De Niro for me. Anyway,
so we had to get that important question out of the way.
That was awesome. Okay, so I'm just gonna read a couple pages from the book. So it's about a girl who is sort of in this suburban, like East End of Long Island town that I made up called Nautilus, and well, I won't say this part, but she's a mess. She's a mess. Her mom's been in and out of the hospital, and she's kind of been left to her own devices, not going to class. She gets in trouble, and all she's really got going on is the ice cream stand. So, but this chapter is one of the few this is half of a chapter, but it's one of the few, because it takes place in the summer. So it takes place in school, and it kind of shows part of why she's just been left on her own. So this is, she's going to see a counselor at school. Okay. Out of habit, I head straight for the main office where information is exchanged without the guilt that's unavoidable with teachers and counselors. The hallways are quiet, the air thin and moist and oddly cool despite the lack of air conditioning. Now that I'm here, this feels doable. Maybe I can, in fact, start over again. I tell the woman at the front desk my name and that I was supposed to start 2 weeks ago. Technically, a week and a half, I add, as if it makes one iota of a difference. Hang on a second, she says. She eyes me up and down. Are you second starts? I resent the assumption, but also her assumption is right, and I hate her a little bit for that as well. I look down I look down at my outfit, cut off shorts, actual jeans I cut above the knees that are now fraying admirably, and a thin cotton t-shirt with a watercolor of a mongoose on the front, my most prized dollar bin clothing item. She sets down the phone she was holding. They have more information for you in the guidance office. My Second Starts counselor is a program for kids who got kicked out and are coming back. My Second Starts counselor is a woman with a fake tan, helmet hair, and a comically raspy voice that rattles the outdated papers on the bulletin board above her desk. She insists on being called Mrs. Delgado. Please always say Mrs., never say Miss. She emphasizes this as Ms. while skimming my file on her computer screen, probably for the first time ever. Somewhere inside, among the data and pixels, is an alternate reality Minerva Gutierrez, a version they think they know, whose actions are of a lot more importance than those of the one sitting in this chair. Minerva Gutierrez, formerly gifted, currently poor, and a total degenerate. Before everything changed, my favorite subjects were chemistry. I liked the balance of it. My debate elective and sometimes language arts. Before everything changed, I was going to take AP classes. If I could get into college in New York City, I'd go to school as far away as reasonably possible. If I couldn't get into college in New York City, I'd go to school as far away as reasonably possible. The plan was supposed to be Greater Nautilus High School, then college, then a job. I didn't realize how fragile the plan was all along, how comforting it was to have until I got in trouble. Then a piece was taken away, and the entire plan collapsed. Minerva, Mrs. Delgado intones, what happened to your attendance? I haven't been feeling well. This feels true enough. I couldn't sleep, and then I found a sleeping pill in Mom's room, and it hit me like a hand forcing my head underwater. I remember that numb, wavy feeling just before the blissful loss of consciousness and yearn for it now. Well, I must say you look exhausted, she quips. I bite down on a response. It feels like a trick invitation. You've missed quite a lot of days this summer term. All of them, as a matter of fact. She moves on, clicking through more information. She squints at the pages. I'm sorry. She squints at the page. I'm not wearing my glasses. She squints at the page as if to make sure of the number, then widens her eyes, impressed. Absent 62 days in the past school year. She peers over at me expectantly. Yep. She clicks again. I remember you now. Assault and attempted robbery of a fellow student. You could have been charged for real, you know. I know. That's not really what happened. But I've learned with most adults, it never helps to try and set things right, especially when it comes to one's own good name. I see you didn't attend the tutoring sessions during your expulsion period, she says. Why? She means the tutoring sessions forced on me by the school district intended to keep me caught up. These were scheduled at the Nautilus Point Library, 2 trailers back to back on a lot placed behind an older building that used to be a real library until the hurricane before last. This one time I went, the college student volunteer didn't know what a homonym was, which caused me to question the validity of the entire system. Mom would have come to the same conclusion. Mrs. Delgado moves on while I'm still trying to figure out how to answer. She locks her hands over the desk. I know you've been through a lot, Minerva. I hope very much for your sake we can find a place for you. She waits for me to respond, but all I can think is that Second Starts is supposed to be the place for me. Mom saw to it when she last met with the school. That, plus Mrs. Delgado is one of those people who uses names like punctuation marks. Yeah, me too, I mumble. She half nods as if that'll suffice. We only want the best for all of our students from Nautilus Point. Give them the support they need to become productive members of society. I could scream at the words, the lipstick smile, the fake reassuring tone. Why can't she just talk to me like a person instead of a brochure? Some people, she continues, might be better suited for alternative programming. At this, my temples sting, which used to signal tears coming. What's that mean, alternative programming? Well, the local opportunity center has a wonderful high school equivalency program, for instance. A cold wave knocks me over. Are you saying I have to drop out? There are only so many resources we can provide in Second Starts. Some people, Mrs. Delgado repeats, her voice thinning, just aren't a good fit. The words are thick in my throat. But I'm here now. She looks directly into my eyes. I'm afraid it's too late. All I can think about is Nicole, her cousin, insisting that I haven't been trying. I clench my hands, containing the heat of what feels like all my 17 years. Deep breaths, count to 10, 15, 20. None of it makes a difference. Does this make sense? Mrs. Delgado asks what I'm saying to you. No, I shake my head. The cold wave has turned me upside down. Yeah. Wonderful. I'll be sending some paperwork in the mail for your parents, whoever, to review. You take care.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I wish I didn't have to follow that. That was a mistake, going in that order. We never really outgrow enjoying having stories read to us. I was like sitting there just like cross-legged in front of you, like just enjoying having the story read to me. We never outgrow that. All right.
I can't wait, personally.
You're too kind. So I am going to read, okay. So this part takes place at the private school on kind of a field trip. They go apple picking on the weekend. And so, spoiler alert, I guess, they do go to the boarding school. I just said that I wanted to write a boarding school book, so I guess I ruined that part of the story for you. But anyway, So they're at this apple orchard, and it's my main character Cash, and two of his best friends at school, Viviani, who goes by V, who's based on my Brazilian friend Viviani, and his friend Alex Pack, who is based on my good buddy Rich Pack. So Delaney, the friend of Cash's who got him to the school, he's on the outs with Delaney right now, so she's not with them. V comes down her little stepladder and sits cross-legged under her tree. She rummages through her basket for an especially choice apple. I walk over. Mind if I join you? Sit, she says. I do, leaning against the tree, the roughness of the bark a prickle on my back through my t-shirt. V and I look at each other and smile. She hands me the apple she'd picked out for herself. Here, you need to learn to appreciate apples more. She rummages in her basket and comes up with another ruddy, perfect specimen. She twists off the stem and takes a big bite from the top. She sees my quizzical look. Do you know this way of eating apples? There's a secret method? You eat from the top, and the middle part, the core disappears. Seriously? Try it. I do. True to her word, as I eat from the top down, the core seems to simply vanish. I spit out a couple seeds. That's wild. Pretty cool, yeah? This does work. Try it. I get a lot of messages telling me that people now eat apples this way. Pretty cool, yeah? When I was a kid, I'd sit on the porch with my papaw, and he'd get an apple and cut slices off it with his pocket knife and hand them to me. V scoots backward to lean against the tree beside me. See, you should like apples more. We sit without talking, the crunch of apples and the wind the only sounds. Then we hear the honking of geese in the distance. It crescendos as they near and fly over us in their triangular rank. They fade from sight and hearing into the distance. V sighs wistfully. I wonder where they're going. South. Don't know where exactly. Where we're from, V says. That's right. How do they know where to go? That's another question for Delaney. Hope I get to ask her someday soon. V sighs again, but less wistful and more sad. You okay, I ask? I had a big fight with my parents this morning and didn't think about it until now. When you said to ask Delaney that question, it reminded me of how I used to ask my parents things before I knew how to look things up online. What was the fight over, I ask. She picks up a fallen twig and starts breaking off little pieces and flicking them away. They don't like that I want to develop video games. My father wants me to study business so I can help with his company. That sucks. I told him I won't be helpful to you if I don't love what I'm doing. V gets to the end of her twig. You deserve to do what you love in life. I pick up another twig and hand it to her. She gives me a melancholy smile and accepts my offering. I love my parents, but I think they don't always know who I am very well. There anything I can do? She snaps off a piece of the twig, reaches over and gently sets it upright in my hair. Let me grow apple trees on your head so every time we hang out I can have free apples. My entire body hums at her closeness and touch. The crackle I felt last night at the game is still present. I sit stone still. Anything you want. I've never met something more. She plants another piece of twig in my hair. You don't talk about your parents. I don't answer until I'm sure I can do it with complete nonchalance that won't betray me. Nah, not really. What are they like? Another section of twig in my hair. You know, they're cool. They're just parents. They love me. They want me to do well. Every lie feels like holding a hot panhandle, but I'm too far from anywhere where I can easily set it down without making a mess. Blessedly, Alex calls over. Anyone catch what kind of apples these are? Pink Lady, I say. Sounds like a strip club. These are 1,000 times better than Red Delicious apples, Alex says. Red Delicious is half a lie. You gonna call out Red Delicious apples like that, I say? I just did. Red Delicious apples can bring it. Damn, son. The three of us talk for a while. After this, we're going to a corn maze. Neither Alex nor V have ever been to one. We'll have donuts and cider and go on a hayride. We'll get back in time to catch midnight matinee. Our conversation subsides and I look up at the sky and I think what a wondrous color it is. Delaney told me once that some scientists think humans only started seeing the color blue about 4,500 years ago. Or maybe they didn't have the vocabulary to describe it. She said that in ancient writings like Homer's Odyssey, the sea is described as being the color of wine. I miss Delaney and her facts. V and I turn to each other. She selects 2 more apples from her basket and hands me one, keeping the other for herself. You'll get sick if you eat too many, I say. I'm not afraid. She reaches over and gingerly plucks out the twigs she placed in my hair one by one. Did you change your mind about wanting to grow apple trees on my head? Yeah, we can just come back here for apples. See? Works for me. She scans the orchard, looking at the blaze of sugar maples in the distance. The wind breathes through the orchard's laden branches and dry leaves. I like autumn in Connecticut, she says softly. I do too. We eat our apples and let the juice dry sticky on our fingers. It's late in the afternoon, and she glows like something holy in the golden waning light. I think of her touching my hair, the warmth of her thigh against mine. I guess apples aren't the only sweetness that can consume you. So there you go. So let me ask you this. Both of us. So here's a little statistic for you. Only about 10% of published authors make their living only writing books. And of that percentage, I am guessing there's a pretty fair percentage that has maybe like family wealth or, inherited money, or they've sold a business or something. Point is, very few authors solely make their living writing books. It's very difficult to do that. So what that means is I have a day job. And Francesca, I understand you have a day job as well. What do you do?
I do. Well, I just started a new job like last week at my local United Way as a program officer, and I have worked in nonprofits for a long time since I graduated college. I had no desire to teach writing. I had no desire to work in publishing, and I grew up very poor, and so I was like, "Oh, nonprofits! Like, this is what I understand." So yeah, it's.
Yeah, so I work, and throughout my whole publishing career have worked as an attorney. So I started my publishing career, I worked as a prosecutor for the state of Tennessee. Then I switched over a few years ago, and I became an environmental lawyer. So I head up a team of environmental criminal investigators. We go after environmental offenders. And I also help out Tennessee state parks. So I represent the state park system. And, if they need to get a piece of land for a state park, I help them do all that. So it definitely keeps me busy. How do you find the time? How do you find the time and the creative space around a day job? Because I'm guessing there's folks maybe in this audience who are writers. They want to be writers, but they think, I can't be a real writer until I can devote all of my time and energy to writing. Which I just don't think is true.
Yeah, no, it's not true. Who here is a writer or aspiring writer? Yeah, okay, you want this advice. No, I couldn't write all the time. Like, if I had the opportunity, like sudden independent wealth, like I still wouldn't want to just sit down and write all day. Like, I'd want to be out there doing stuff.
I'd just watch more TV.
Word. Like, yeah, I'd just be playing Candy Crush. Like, so, like, I kind of have to be out. Like, it's just what I want to do. I also want health insurance. And I also have 2 kids, so I really am pressed for time a lot. But I think that, I just don't write very fast. But when I have long periods of time where I'm just not writing, I'd rather read more than write. Like, it's more important for me to just read consistently because that's kind of what keeps me interested, even if I'm not physically just writing. So I don't have the aspiration to be writing book after book after book. I don't know if maybe that'll change. That might change, but I guess so. My advice would be, so when I do write though, and I have to be interested, and I do tend to put out a lot at one time, like writing in bursts. And so the way that I do that, and I give this advice out a lot, so if anyone has heard this before, I'm sorry, but it bears repeating. So there's a writer, I think her name is Susan Dennard, who writes a lot about like craft and how she gets through, like how she keeps going with writing, especially when she's stuck. And I always come back to this advice that she gave, and she has it on her blog. You just Google magical cookies, and the advice is to find the magical cookies in your writing. So like magical cookies basically means what really excites you, what is delicious to you about your own work. And so there's a whole breakdown that she has about how she does it, but that's the long and the short of it for me is like just staying emotionally invested and interested in what I'm writing, because if I'm not interested, nobody else is going to be interested. And so that's how like the writing that comes out the fastest is always the best received. I don't know if that makes sense. And it comes out fast because I'm interested. And when it's a slog, I always have to go back and like change things, and and it's not as clean. So finding the joy in my own stuff, being interested, like reconnecting all the time with what made me want to write that story in the first place. So for this book, it would be like I came back a lot to the setting, the grittiness of the beach town, the segregation, the economic segregation that was interesting to me. Having to work, like I love workplace stories, like workplace comedies especially, and the characters themselves. So, and then also a program called Write or Die, which forces you to write. Yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I'm totally with you where I have like 2 hours of good writing in me a day at the most, like maybe more like a half hour to an hour at the most. And so if I were a full-time writer, I would just I guess I would read more. I would definitely watch more TV. I would find ways to fritter away the time. So what I used to do when I had a work commute, now I mostly work remote, but when I had a work commute, I would write on the bus. So my first 4 books, I wrote almost completely with my right thumb on the phone on the bus.
I did that too with the first version of this.
Totally.
On the subway.
Totally. And that's the beauty of writing as an art form, is that you can build the house in such tiny little increments. You can be in line at the grocery store and bang out 35 words standing there in line at the grocery store. So writing is very amenable to a lifestyle in which you have to work a day job. I can't think of any other art form that is more amenable to that. And I think there are some real benefits to working a day job as a writer. It keeps you in contact with human beings, and you're out there in the world, you're interacting. Like I imagine it gets very easy to just kind of forget how normal people are. Like I'm not throwing shade on Stephen King. I love Stephen King. He is one of my guys. But if you read, especially when he writes a teenager, it's like, dude, you have not been around a teenager in a very long time. I love the man. I love
Even
his
Carrie?
books. What's that?
Even Carrie?
No, that's when he was still in touch.
Yeah,
I think. But
his
if you
first
read,
book. That's why.
Yeah, yeah. If you read something more recent, he's got teenagers like talking like they're from the 50s, and it is bananas. But then they're talking about like YouTube.
What's up, local teens?
Yeah, what's up, local teens?
Like, what's up, fellow youth?
Totally. So, but the other real benefit of a day job, I think, is for me, I'm very security minded in terms of I really can't focus on creative things until my material needs are cared for. Like I'm not going to trust a blue jay to fly in my window with the rent check, I've got to have that taken care of before I have space to create. So the day job takes care of that, and I can write the stories I want to write, and I don't have to think, well, I want to write this story, but I don't think it's going to be a big seller, so I better write something that's a bigger seller so I can pay for my health insurance. So working a day job can actually be very, very freeing. So anyway, that's my little pitch for that. We got about 10. I saw the 10-minute warning. I want to give you all some time for questions. Do y'all have some questions? What do you got? Surely y'all have some questions out there. Hey, Brenna.
Hi. How are you?
Good. We're Instagram friends. Good to see you.
Big fan. So I was wondering, have you ever turned in a book to an editor and you thought like this is finished, and then it was like totally different, once you went through the editing revision phase with an editor, like working with them?
My answer is going to be short because I only wrote one book, or I've only published one book. I've written other books, but that weren't published. No, I think my process is usually adding more, always adding more. Like, I kind of underwrite, and then people are like, I want to see more of this, and I want to see more of this. Can you expand this? Can you expand this? There wasn't a ton of, like, rearranging. I did get a ridiculous amount of notes from my editor, and you know, in the end, it made the book stronger, and I think it's because I underwrite. So, not a ton of changing, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about this.
So I've been really blessed in that basically I've worked with two editors. I worked with an editor for my first 4 young adult books, and I'm working with a new editor now for my adult book. Not pornography, for the adult market.
I always think that when I say adult book.
Well, when you write young adult and then you differentiate it with adult, it's like adult bookstore off the truck stop, off the highway exit.
So true.
No, not pornography entirely, but so, and I've been very blessed in that they are both editors. I mean, something you'll hear in publishing a lot, especially now, is editors don't really edit. They acquire books. And they don't really get into the hard editing. I've heard of people actually going out and hiring editors to edit their book because they don't trust their editor to do it. So I've been really blessed in that regard. So both of these editors will put me through like revision after revision. Each of my books had at least 3 major revisions. The big editorial letter that was like 10 pages long, then the editorial letter that was 5 pages long, then the editorial letter that was 2 pages long, then the email that's like 2 sentences long that says you finally did it. So so yeah, each time and each time I had that book to where I thought there was nothing that could be improved. It's as perfect as this flawed tabernacle of clay is ever going to get it. So yeah, I mean, and it is jarring to go through that process. It really is. Like, but that's just part of it. And it's really key to find people that you trust, whether it be beta readers, so your critique partners as a writer, an editor, agents can be very editorial. Is your agent
yes.
an editor? Yeah, that's great. That's great. Great question. Thanks, Brenna.
Mine's a 3-parter.
Oh no.
Hey.
So you won't get off easy. But I guess first part, well, first off, congratulations to both of you on all of your successes with your work. It's no easy feat to write and publish a piece of literary work, so congratulations.
Thank you.
But to my question, how do you insulate yourself creatively when there's elements of your work that are clearly inspired by, your personal life? And how do you not let your personal life get in the way of your creative process? That's the first question. So take it away.
So, wait, personal life as in, like,
So-
the influence?
Correct.
Not, like, the daily stuff that
So
gets in the way of writing.
Not being a slave to what actual elements may have been drawn from your life.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, and I get asked about it a fair amount, and I think it's because, like, it's obvious. Yeah, my book is autobiographical, and the girl is, like, feisty like I am, even though, like I said, she's based on not me. She's based on dude's little sister from forever ago. And she kind of looks like me, too, which is not intentional. But I think of it as they are separate from me. Characters who I write, they are fully themselves. They're like real people almost. And I think about it like being an actor or being like a puppeteer, where I am using them as a vessel to explore the things that interest me. And so it doesn't really get in the way. Like, it doesn't really, like, writers in general, from what I understand, they don't sit down and say, well, like, I'm gonna write a fictional story, but about my life, like, and how am I gonna, like, I'm just gonna change the names. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, they have to be outside of me, and I can manipulate them however I want. And because they're real people, it helps me, like, just they have their own voice, and it kind of comes to me. I don't know if that's helpful.
I think of my characters as kind of children in a way, and as parents, we want our children to be better than us. We want better for them than we had, and that's what I want for my characters. I want better for them than to be tied to my weaknesses. I want my characters to have the freedom to be better than me, smarter than me, more empathetic
I
than
love
me,
that.
just more interesting than me in every
Yeah.
way. So I'm like, yeah, that is always driving my character choices. So the most I'll put into a character of myself is maybe like 30-40%, like a kernel. And from there, they build the layers of their person. I'll draw from other people I know, give them those traits, but in general, I just want them to be better than me.
The last two follow-ups, if I may. What went into your decision to go with first person? That's the first one. And then the second one, you guys both spoke about, staying in touch with younger generations. How do you do that without dating your material?
First person, I don't know. It just came to me. Although I do waffle back and forth in literally everything that I write, if it's going to be first person or third person, like everything. So that's not, I have no answer for that because that's hard. It's what sounds better is my answer. And although for YA, it's like, it gives more immediacy.
That's just what I was going to say.
Yeah. And then how do I stay in touch? Well, I have a 12-year-old. So there's that. And I think I'm just like, I've always liked youthful things. So just music helps. I really love Megan Thee Stallion and Doja Cat. And I don't know, man. That kind of stumped me a little bit.
I have a 14-year-old, and I would use him if he talked to me, but
Word,
he doesn't.
yeah.
So so what I do is I have a keen memory for the emotional space of teenage.
Yes.
I have a really keen emotional memory. Most young adult writers, I think, do. The ones who write well do. And so I just remember how it felt to be a teenager. And so I take a step back from that. I don't try to reproduce teen slang. I think that's a fool's errand because by the time it percolates up
I
to
agree
us,
with that.
dunzo. So,
agree.
and see, I use phrases like dunzo, which means that I'm not using teenage slang. So I try to reproduce the energy of teenage dialogue without trying to produce the specific. Teenagers love to speak with wit, energy. They love to poke at each other. They love to jab at each other. They love to talk about things that matter. They like to talk about things they don't understand. They like to try to understand things they don't understand. They like to use words that they don't know what they mean.
That's so true.
Yeah. So I just try to reproduce an energy. Y'all, I think that's all our time.
Okay.
Thank
Yay,
you.
Thank you so
Y'all
much.
are awesome. Thank you.